Hello and welcome to session number 2 of our first ever clinical summit week here at Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. If you guys were on for Holistic Health Week back in March, can you let me know that in the chat? Because I recognize some of these names, I swear. So I think some of you guys maybe made it on for our Holistic Health Week. As you can tell, we learned a lot from that week that we did. It was basically just an insane week where there were 6 or 7 sessions in a row. We were literally live streaming for 5 to 7 hours each day. And we've gotten a little smarter with that to give you guys a break, give our speakers a break, give me some break. So this will be our second session today. We'll take an hour gap, go grab some lunch, ideally gluten-free, organic, all that good stuff. Grab some water, filtered, purified, vegan, paleo water, the good stuff. And then we'll be back for 2 sessions this afternoon. Remember, that'll be a separate link that is in your email, but I'm going to share that with you guys directly towards the end of this session, just so you can copy and paste it and have it ready for yourselves for this afternoon. It's going to be great. I'll tease who we're going to be talking to at the end of that, but you can always check the schedule at fdntraining.com/CSW schedule. That's fdntraining.com/CSW, like clinical summit week, CSW schedule. Let's see here. So I have some yes. Trisha said I was Ev. Sean said yes. Awesome. Really cool. We appreciate your guys' energy. So I'm going to bring my friend Martha in here. Hello, Martha. What we're going to do, because we're live, obviously, so it's kind of fun getting thrown right into this. It's like a live conference. I'm going to bring your slides up for you. And I actually want to read your bio so people know who you are, but I want to give you a chance to mess around with these. So if you hover over the slides right now, you'll see at the top of your slides, there's a 1 out of 33, and you should be able to move the arrows. So I'm going to switch my screen, read the bio. Hopefully that works for you. And if it doesn't, we will 100% get this figured out. So Martha Carlin is a citizen scientist, systems thinker, and founder of the Bio Collective and BiotiQuest. After her husband's Parkinson's diagnosis, she left her corporate career to investigate the links between the microbiome, chronic disease, and environmental toxins. That's why I always feel like Martha is fully one of us. So many FDNs, for example, and maybe you guys can relate to this if you're in the alternative health space, but not an FDN. We don't set out to do this at 5 years old. I did not tell my mom and dad, I know what I'm going to do when I'm 29. I'm going to be a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I'm going to talk online with these spotlights and basically what is my bedroom office. And we're going to be talking to hundreds of people about nerdy stuff. I didn't say that at 5 years old, but some of us have health experiences with ourselves or people that we love that lead us here. I don't even think I mentioned this in the first session. I had 7 different health conditions at the age of 18. And I'm very thankful to say, because I went through the FDN program, I no longer meet the diagnostic criteria for any of those conditions. So Martha's a warrior like us, right? She saw what was happening with her husband, said, I'm going to drop everything, figure this out. And she's absolutely brilliant. So let me finish her bio here as I keep hyping her up. Martha has collaborated with leading scientists, funded groundbreaking research, and developed innovative probiotic solutions to restore microbial function and metabolic balance. Welcome to Clinical Summit Week, my friend. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Evan. I'm excited to be here.
Is everything going well with your slides? Are you able to move them?
Let's see.
Okay.
I am able to move them. So
right,
you covered the groundwork on this. So can I just hop in? I'm going to.
The floor is yours, my friend.
But I do have a TED Talk. If you're interested in that, it's called Do Gut Bacteria Predict or Cause Diseases Like Parkinson's? And you can just find that by Googling Martha Carlin TEDx on YouTube, and you'll find that. So with that, we'll get on to the microbes. And, it was interesting because I was able to see the last part of the previous presenters' diagnostic panels. And that was really interesting for me because you'll see a bit throughout my presentation today, the microbes are really the drivers of most of those metabolites that you're looking at in the test. And I think, people are starting to understand the importance of the microbiome, but I don't think it is fully appreciated how much the microbes are contributing to all of these underlying issues we have and our ability to uptake the nutrients or the supplements we're providing. So, The microbiome. What is the microbiome? Well, it's the trillions of bacteria, fungi, viruses that live in and on our body, and it really functions as our internal pharmacy. There are 100 trillion microbes, weighs about 4 pounds. In terms of DNA or genes, it's in the neighborhood of 150 times more microbial genes than human genes, and in terms of cells, 2 to 1 bacteria to human cells. And, you have a lot of not only the bacteria and the fungi, but you also have the parasites, protozoa, and all of the peptides and molecules that are being made by these microbes. So, what is the microbiome doing? Well, it's making those hormones and neurotransmitters. So we saw a lot of those measurements in the last presentation. Many of those neurotransmitters are made in the gut. There's actually a researcher by the name of John Cryan at the University College Cork in Ireland, who's written a book on microbial endocrinology, which is essentially how those microbes are making those hormones and neurotransmitters and how that's communicating with our brain. The microbiome regulates metabolism, energy storage, and expenditure. 70% of our immune system is located in our gut. The microbiome is making those B vitamins. It is digesting and making the nutrients available from our food. It regulates inflammation. It's making those bioactive compounds, peptides that are so important for signaling molecules. It's important for pathogen protection. Bacteria are kind of in a constant battle with each other. And if you have a healthy and balanced microbiome, the good bacteria will be able to keep the bad guys in check. The microbiome is also very important to detoxification of things like heavy metals. And it is producing amino acids. So the bacteria in our gut, also from the last presentation, she talked a bit about the tryptophan pathway, and I think tyrosine and phenylalanine. And those 3 amino acids are actually made in the gut by bacteria or in plants. We don't make those amino acids ourselves. They're the only amino acids that fluoresce, so they carry light, and they are extremely important, but the microbes that make those are really under assault. So microbes are everywhere, and they are connecting and transforming everything. So, we're here talking about the human body and the gut, but it goes all the way back to the soil and what we have done to the soil by depleting the microbes there. It does the same thing in a plant's ability to take up nutrition that we're seeing in the human body and our lack of ability to take up nutrition. So the food that we're eating now is not as nutrient dense as it used to be. And a lot of that is due to the loss of microbial diversity in our soils due to our chemical farming. So, on to the minerals. Minerals are cofactors for hundreds of enzymes involved in metabolism. And as FDMs, of course, all of this. But I think it's really underappreciated the importance of the relationship between the microbes and the minerals. There's actually a little book. It's one of my favorite books. It's called The Life Bridge, The Way to Longevity with Probiotic Nutrients. It's about 25 years old, and it's out of print, but you can still get it used on Amazon and some of the used booksellers. But it talks about how the microbes make inorganic matter, so those minerals, it makes that inorganic matter into living matter that we can actually absorb. So, as an example, in the book, it talks about selenium, and selenium as a USP supplement in a bottle, and selenomethionine, and then selenium from a nutritional yeast that has gone through a fermentation process. The selenium in that nutritional yeast is about 250 times more bioavailable than either of those two other forms of taking selenium. So I think that's also something to really start to understand and appreciate, is how important the fermentation process of the bacteria in our body throughout our digestive tract, what that is doing for us. So, and of course, energy production requires minerals. So all of those processes in the mitochondrial respiratory chain for energy production require minerals. And we can't make the energy without the minerals. Well, the organophosphate herbicide glyphosate, I talk about this a lot. It tightly binds to minerals, making them inaccessible for enzyme cofactors. That is a well-known fact in agriculture, and it is becoming a more well-known fact on the human side. The long-term impacts of glyphosate, it targets and something called the shikimate pathway, and that's the pathway where those three aromatic amino acids, tyrosine, tryptophan, and phenylalanine, are made. And that's also the pathway downstream of that where you get melanin, dopamine, even your thyroid hormones. So there are roughly about 4,000 secondary metabolites that come downstream of that shikimate pathway that you're going to be getting, polyphenols and these aromatic amino acids and all of the byproducts that come out of those. And so when we are increasingly exposed to these organophosphate herbicides that are binding the minerals and breaking that shikimate pathway in the bacteria, it becomes increasingly difficult for the minerals to be activated and bioavailable for us for energy. So I often talk about the fact that we're living in a time where glyphosate has kind of mimicked something, a study that was done back during World War II called the Minnesota Starvation Study, which basically deprived the subjects of micronutrients. And that's really what glyphosate is doing to us, is depriving us of these essential micronutrients. Okay, it didn't advance. There we go. So what are we made of in terms of the elements? Well, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, and calcium. I think there's one other one under there, magnesium. But the trace elements, these other very small trace elements, are really some of the most key to the enzyme action. And of those, phosphorus, magnesium, copper, iron, and zinc are really essential. My little titles are covered up by the... So here's your periodic table. And when you look at this, the blue, the elements marked in blue are the ones that are historically identified as essential for life in humans. And then the ones that are yellow are suggested to be essential. And then, many of these others, and there was a bit of a discussion about heavy metals and toxins. What will happen is these other elements will interfere with the uptake of these critical elements. Okay. So the trace elements that are needed for energy production: magnesium, iron, copper, zinc, and manganese. And these are also the ones that are most disrupted by glyphosate. So magnesium is needed for ATP synthesis and utilization. It's involved in carbohydrate metabolism, lipid and protein, RNA, DNA synthesis. It's very essential to life on the planet, and most of us today are deficient in magnesium. Iron assists in energy production and DNA synthesis, but iron needs copper actually to recirculate properly in the body. And so if we don't have sufficient copper, then the iron metabolism and recirculation in the body is not working properly. And copper is actually the element that binds most tightly to glyphosate. So there's an order of magnitude, and Dr. Don Huber, who's one of the leaders in talking about the impact of glyphosate, has showed me that it's logarithmic. So it will chelate all the copper first and then kind of move down through the elements. And because of the load that we are getting exposed to glyphosate now, so say back in 2014, there was a study published by Nancy Swanson and Andre Liu that showed a correlation with about 20 chronic diseases, the rise of those chronic diseases, and glyphosate and GMO corn and soy in the environment. And the correlation with that many diseases is hard to argue with. People will say correlation is not causation, but it's pretty shocking when you see it. And it's everything from kidney disease to different kinds of cancer to Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And that study has not been updated. But since that time, so that was 11 years ago, glyphosate is now used to dry down crops. So at the end of the harvest, to make the crops dry faster and more uniformly, they'll spray them with glyphosate. So then they also have a higher residue at the end left because it was sprayed at the end. And those 60 crops are things like chickpeas, a lot of your beans, and all the grains. So, we have people who have gluten problems, but as a part of that, it's also the glyphosate residue on the grains. And that also contributes to the mycotoxin load in the grains as well, because things like aspergillus are actually resistant to glyphosate. And so you get a higher load of the fungi that can produce those toxins because they're resistant to glyphosate, but the good bacteria that are beneficial on the plants are destroyed by glyphosate. So zinc is also involved in energy production, and manganese is involved in glucose synthesis and amino acid catabolism. And manganese is another mineral that is significantly impacted by glyphosate. So this actually, I'm hoping it's a little bit bigger on your screen than it is mine, but oh wait, here I can make it bigger. I didn't. Well, that helps a lot. So vitamins are extracted and produced by the gut microbes. And so we saw in some of those tests on that earlier one, several places that were mentioned, the B vitamins. And you can see here, we have the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum, and the colon. And pretty much throughout the process, except even in the jejunum, you have B vitamins that are being produced all along the way in the different parts of the GI tract. And one of the things that I think is often missed is when we start to get the colonic bacteria moving up higher into the GI tract. And this is where in the small intestine is where a lot of the nutritional uptake occurs, and many of these vitamins are being produced. And if you get SIBO or SIFO, those microbes have moved up into the small intestine, and they start to steal the nutrients from you as the host. And so that's another underappreciated kind of piece of the puzzle. If somebody is suffering from nutrient deficiencies, is really looking at what's going on in the small bowel. And that's hard to do because, a fecal sample test is only going to tell you what's coming out in waste, and that will often miss what's in the upper GI tract. You can do the breath tests for hydrogen sulfide and methane, and those will give you some idea. But there's a lot going on at this interface of the gut lining with the microbes and the breakdown of the food that we're eating and the uptake of nutrients. But as this lining can get damaged, then what happens if we're not digesting the food properly? So, say we don't have enough stomach acid and we're not fully digesting the food and we have a leaky gut, then we start to get food particles crossing over, and that can exacerbate inflammation and autoimmune conditions. And this is also where our short chain fatty acids are made. And butyrate is one of the most important short chain fatty acids that's made by the gut bacteria. And that is really what feeds the epithelial cells that line our gut. So, and the microbes are making these B vitamins in the Krebs cycle. But there are also, I'll say, bad guy microbes that can run this cycle backwards. So you can get what's called a feudal energy cycle, where you have some microbes that are running the Krebs cycle forward and making energy and making these metabolites. And you have some microbes that are running the Krebs cycle backwards and using them all up. And you can get this, it's called a feudal cycle, where the metabolites are feeding back into each other instead of producing the energy for the host. But this is really the key interface of where those B vitamins are made. And you can see why here up at the top, that B1 deficiency can be a major issue, because that is one of the substrates really feeding into this whole cycle and the importance of production of those B vitamins. There's a great book by Dr. Derek Lonsdale. I think it's called thiamine deficiency and high calorie malnutrition. So kind of back to that concept of the Minnesota starvation study, is that, if we have insufficient B1, we can potentially be in a state of high calorie malnutrition. And it was interesting. There was a few years back, there was an article, I think in Nature, about the loss of some of the bird species. And one of the things that they found was that they were deficient in B1. And I wonder too if they're also being impacted by glyphosate and their microbiomes. So the mitochondria are relatives of bacteria. So this Krebs cycle is going on in the mitochondria, same as it is in the bacteria. So just kind of a quick overview of the connection of the, microbes are a close relative to our mitochondrial energy factories. So, back to this slide, here in this interface, what's happening is we're ingesting starches that feed the bacteria, drugs that impact them, dietary fibers, and these xenobiotics, or the toxins that we're exposed to. Those toxins like mycotoxins or chemicals that damage the cell lining, all of these things that are going on here as we start to put these toxins into the body from our food supply and the water if it's not clean. And, I think probably as FDNs, you're familiar that the public water supply is not treated for to remove pharmaceuticals. So if you're not filtering your water or doing something about your water supply, you are ingesting a number of pharmaceutical products that you don't realize. And all of those have an impact along the way. So here just is back to a review of which ones of the minerals are at this interface at these different points along the digestive process that are secreting those metabolites that affect our nutritional status. So let's talk about the membranes a bit. And, that membrane is what's called an ecotone, or a transition area between two biological communities. I like to think about it as like the estuaries in a river, or that sort of those transition zones where you see in the ocean, where you might see seaweed or kelp floating. That's sort of a protective barrier and a transition zone between, in our gut, the pipe is our interaction with the outside world, and then the other side of it is our inside world. And so moving along that membrane in the gut is our nutrients, pathogens, the chemicals, the waste products, and all the breakdown particulate matter that goes along with that process. And that's all information. So I talk frequently about how food is information. And in today's food supply, we're getting food from all around the world. So we're not getting the information from where we are. So I think that's kind of a lost kind of piece of the puzzle, if you will, because this is a communication strategy. It's both an antenna, but it's also a protective barrier. So it's taking signals and information from everything that's flowing along the pipe and deciding what it lets in and what it keeps out. So, our healthy membranes that's really our big line of defense. And one of the areas that I have focused the most on for the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, is really looking at the gram-negative bacteria and the endotoxin they produce. And this was in large part because looking at Parkinson's, I actually found over 500 papers showing that using an animal model where they basically inject endotoxin into the mouse and give it Parkinson's-like symptoms. And as I started to look at that, I started looking at other diseases, and you can search PubMed, and it's pretty shocking the number of animal models that use LPS to study the disease. So, diabetes, depression, inflammation, all of those, they use the lipopolysaccharide endotoxin to induce those problems. So if we think about that, these gram-negative bacteria that are producing the lipopolysaccharide are one of the underlying main drivers of inflammation in the body that we've got to deal with and address if we're going to start to feel better. So what happens here is, as the LPS crosses through that barrier, you start to carry an endotoxin load, and it primes the immune system in a way that over time your immune system stops recognizing it. And so, it's this danger signal, but you get this kind of like a frog that you put in water and it starts to boil, and it's slowly boiling but doesn't realize it, because you get this metabolic endotoxemia. I think we can probably go past that one again. So these messages that are going on in the GI tract, it's home to 50 million enteric neurons, and it's communicating with our brain via the vagus nerve. That enteric nervous system is really connected to every one of our organs. And so it's sensing what's going through our GI tract, and it is communicating with the entire body through our nervous system about what's going on. And of course, if we're constantly under a toxic load, it's getting a danger signal that it affects everything in the body, because this sensory organ knows that something is wrong with this toxic load that we're carrying. And this is also where our neurotransmitters are made, as we talked about. And so those are crossing over into the body and going to the brain, and the brain is communicating back with the gut. And I often kind of think of the gut as really, maybe it's the first brain and not really the second brain. These are just a few of the metabolites that are made in the gut by bacteria. I mean, pretty much I haven't found a metabolite yet that I could not go search and find a microbe that makes it. So this is that cell danger response and what's going on here. And what we want to be is in balance, where we're able to sense the danger and deal with it and clear it. And what I see in Parkinson's, and I think in a number of many more things that we're seeing now today, is that people are carrying a very heavy low grade chronic inflammatory state. And much of that relates to the microbiome and what is going on in the gut. So, going back to this intersection between the microbes and the food supply. So, one of the things that we did as a company, we studied the human microbiome through fecal samples for about 7 years before we launched our probiotic products. And the first one I developed was a product called Sugar Shift that I made for my husband. And we studied that over 120 days and saw that it was moving the microbiome back to a healthier human microbiome profile. But we also had a discussion about the difficulty of helping people restore their health if we don't restore the health of our soils and our food supply. And so we started another company called Ancient Organics Bioscience that works in the agriculture industry and has made consortia of microbes that actually break down things like glyphosate and hydrocarbons in the soil and can basically remodel the terrain so that mycotoxin producing fungi are less capable of producing those mycotoxins. And so, we've gone down the chain to try to address the problem. Of course, it's not an easy task fighting the big agricultural industry. But if we don't restore the vitality of our soils, it's very difficult to stay ahead of the game, restoring the human microbiome, because it's all constantly flowing. It's all connected. You cannot separate these things. And I often tell people, we look sometimes at what we're doing out on the crops or whatever, and we think it's out there, but it's not out there. It's in here because it's all interconnected. So in closing out the presentation, the microbiome is really critical, and it's critical to so many of those metabolites, the uptake of the minerals and the nutrients, the breakdown of the food, the production of neurochemicals, hormones, peptides, the production of the short chain fatty acids that feed the gut lining. I mean, our microbial diversity and the ability of our microbiome to perform the functions we need is really essential to life. They are the life bridge, and the protection of that membrane and our ability to stay separated from the outside things that are traveling through our GI tract is also really essential. So when that system's out of balance and the danger signals are everywhere, that's going to lead to that chronic inflammation and chronic disease. And so this is the lineup of our probiotic products that we made. This Sugar Shift is the initial product that I made for John. We ultimately ended up putting that in a clinical trial with diabetes because we knew it was affecting sugar metabolism in the body, and diabetes is also associated with endotoxin, and it's has much easier endpoints to study. And what we found in that clinical trial was a significant reduction in serum endotoxin and also in the lipid A, which is one of the key molecules in the microbiome that is part of that endotoxin production. We have a ideal immunity, which is designed to target pathogens. It's very effective. It has a strain called Lactobacillus ruminus that we have studied and shown that it kills 100% of listeria. It's very effective against Salmonella, E. coli, a lot of those foodborne pathogens. And so we'll often recommend anybody who's had food poisoning or might be going on foreign travel or, summer camping, those places where you might get exposed to pathogens. That's a great product. Antibiotic antidote. I started on this journey into the microbiome after reading Dr. Martin Blazer's book, Missing Microbes. And he was talking about the rise of all these chronic diseases in the age of growing up with antibiotics. And that's really my generation that grew up taking antibiotics. And with each subsequent generation, it got even more pervasive. They're kind of given out like candy. But what he showed was that in some cases, particularly with antibiotics like macrolides, the microbiome never recovers. And so we designed a probiotic after looking at a couple of studies that showed some probiotics can actually make restoration after antibiotics more difficult. And so we looked at what they were using and the importance of having a formula that maintains pH balance and allows the whole gut flora to restore. And so we made the antibiotic antidote. The heart-centered product is designed for the gut to produce CoQ10 and support nitric oxide production for cardiovascular health. And then the Simple Slumber product supports tryptophan metabolism, the bacteria that produce tryptophan, and bacterial melatonin. And then we have a new product coming out later this summer called Perfect Peace that is supporting GABA production and the metabolites for mood and calming anxiety. And all of these formulas were made as guild-based probiotics. You'll see often that a lot of the probiotics on the shelf kind of look the same. And that's because they are pretty much the same, because they come from the three major suppliers, and there's just a handful of strains in that supply chain. And so we actually worked on bringing some of our own strains to market and using a computational model to predict how microbes work together as a team, because in any ecosystem, you need teamwork to support the overall flourishing of the environment. And what we found in our Sugar Shift microbiome study is that product actually helped restore some of the keystone species like Bifidobacteria, Faecali prausnitzii, and Roseburia, which are very important keystone species in the gut. And it helped restore the gut to an anaerobic environment, which is what it's supposed to be. And if you have an aerobic environment in your gut, that's going to support more of those pathogenic organisms. So with that, I will step back and you can ask me questions, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah. First of all, can we please get a thank you in the chat? Maybe I'll regret this because it's going to block some of the questions. But can we get a thank you in the chat, please? But drop your questions. I really appreciate you leaving time for us because it's kind of amazing how dense this was, and yet we still have 14, 15 minutes for this. So I'm going to jump right into some of these questions and make sure you're following Martha, all that good stuff. Also, remember, I hope that you stay for the questions, but if you do have to jump right now, there's going to be an hour gap, and we will be back with you this afternoon. I'm putting that in the chat in just a moment for you guys, but the link is in your email as well, so you will have it there. All right, let's see what we got here.
Oh, and then we also have a discount code, which I think you'll share with the people. But
I don't know that I have that offhand, so if you want to share that, please feel free.
Okay, that is FDNB1, and that will get you buy one, get one 50% off.
So it would look like this, my friend. Let me just check the bottom left of your screen. Excuse me, FDNB1 like that.
Well, okay. I see the private chat. I don't see the public chat.
Oh, no worries. How about this? If I turn this overlay on for you here, can you start to see the chat now?
Yep, now I can see the chat.
Okay, great. So we will do overlay as long as we don't get any crazy people in the chat.
That's it. FDNB1.
Awesome. Okay. Guys, the slides. So we are not able to give out the slides this time. We didn't ask all of our speakers, but we are working on that. We might be able to do something. So, all right, let's just get to one question that I see first to make this easy. Lisa. Hello, Lisa. I know Lisa. Can we get a list?
I did also I can send you like a 2-page kind of handout if you want to send it out to people later that kind of summarizes some of this too.
Thank you. We can get that done for sure. All right. Lisa said, can we get a list of the books she mentioned? Maybe that could be on the resource if you don't mind. Is that possible?
Yeah, I can add that too.
All right, body balancing, and I promise I'm going to go back to some of the other questions before. I'm just scrolling back through the thank yous. Any recommendations for antibiotic resistance H. pylori? Let me say one thing really quick, guys. Obviously, this is not medical advice when we're asking these questions. Martha is answering these generally, perhaps what she would do. She's not telling you to do that. So with that said, any recommendations for antibiotic resistant H. pylori infections?
That is a really tough one, and actually one we've been looking at in Parkinson's and in a paper that we have coming out, because H. pylori is a urease producer, and what it does is it kills the good, it produces the urease that kills the good bacteria, and it spills potassium out, and it really wreaks havoc in the system. I will say Dr. William Davis with his Supergut protocol has had some success with his Reuteri and Gaceri yogurt protocol that people follow for about, I want to say 90 days. And he uses a little breath marble, I think is what it's called. You can blow into it, and they now can test for both methane and hydrogen sulfide gases. And so you can use that as kind of a measure also of what foods may be affecting it. So that's also a kind of another way to look at that. So I would recommend looking at Dr. Davis's Supergut book and some of his videos about his protocol for that. It is problematic to deal with the H. pylori.
Thank you for shouting him out. We've had not only yourself, but also him on the podcast. I see over 100 of you subscribed, by the way, so shameless plug. Thank you, guys. You can see at the bottom right on your screens, there will be a place to subscribe. We have talks like this all the time on YouTube. And in addition, we are one of the only places in the industry that does live podcasts, so you can ask questions to our guests all the time. All right, Rindy, thank you for your patience here. How does sugar shift affect people who get gas from mannitol in food products?
Well, it's interesting. Most of the time, the mannitol in food products is going to be a much higher level than what you're getting in the probiotic. And because the bacteria, it's made as a system. So while you are producing mannitol, you also have bacteria that are using the mannitol, but if you have somebody that has very high level of sensitivity to FODMAPs, I actually recommend addressing that first before you try the sugar shift, or to try the sugar shift at a very low dose and kind of gradually titrate up. I've had people who have started even with half a capsule sprinkled on their food, and that seems to enable them to kind of gradually move through it. Because the biggest issue is also really the die-off that goes with that. If somebody's having a lot of FODMAP issues, and they probably have more of those gram-negative bugs, and they have that aerobic gut. And so, it's a transition that has to be handled pretty carefully, or you've just got to be able to kind of tough through that process. One of the ways that, so if you're familiar with Natasha Campbell McBride and the GAPS diet, that can also help kind of knock some of that down by removing all the fermentable carbohydrates for a period of time and helping restore the gut with bone broths and that kind of stuff. And then you can move into trying something like Sugar Shift.
Sure. All right, Lisa, picking favorites here. I'm going to go back to yours from before. Do you recommend to test the gut after antibiotic use first before taking the products to see if it's really needed?
Well, I'm going to tell you that, like, taking a gut test after you take, shortly after you take antibiotics, well, it might give you a clue if you have an antibiotic resistant strain of something, depending on the test that you do. But, my experience in looking at microbiome samples post antibiotics, oral antibiotics, is that it's wiped out the microbiome. So there's not a lot there to give you a clue. If you've done IV antibiotics, it may be less detrimental. There's a researcher at Ohio State who did some work on that and showed that I think oral antibiotics had a 5 log difference in the destruction of microbiome as opposed to getting a shot or an IV antibiotic.
Wow. This is a personal comment now. I just wanted to say thank you because I heard at the end, you were just, the fact that you're even highlighting the fact that, hey, can the microbiome with certain antibiotics even go back to normal? And like, what could we possibly do to hopefully change that in the future? For myself, I had always wondered that because I was unfortunately on 20 courses plus before the age of 18 of antibiotics, all oral, and some of them lasting a month to 2 months. So it's almost amazing that I feel as good as I do now, and I'm very thankful for that. But I always have kind of wondered, like, we're running a giant science experiment that no one asked for. No, we have no idea what happens to someone when from the age of 0 to 18, we just start running endless courses of antibiotics on them and say, we're going to hope for the best during this very developmental phase of your life. You know what I mean?
Right. It's pretty crazy. And especially like small children. So the microbiome typically stabilizes about age 3. So these kids who, in those first 3 years of life have a lot of disruption, that can also lead to kind of a lifetime of problems. But I also like to kind of hold out hope because, if you look at some of the ecosystems that we have damaged on the planet, I have a friend who is the executive director of the Apostle Islands in Lake Superior. And that was a really toxic area 50, 75 years ago from industrial waste and all of that. And they kind of stepped back and the environment has restored. And a lot of that is the microbes that have done that. And I do see someone's asking about John. So I didn't give the update about, so John had COVID at the end of 2021, and he had a pretty severe case of long COVID. And in September of last year, he had a pulmonary embolism that was most likely related to the long COVID. And he passed away, unfortunately.
Oh, I did not know that. I'm so sorry.
So, and part of that, we're actually, we're looking at a lot of the research around the glycocalyx, that membrane, and, damage that was done to that likely by COVID, and how that may have been implicated.
And still out here helping people. You are a very special person, my friend, and I mean that very literally. Lisa said, thank you so much for this info. This is, gosh, this has been so good. All right, let me go back to, there were some other questions from before. We have that.
Yes, there's a lot of heavy metal questions too. And what I will say is there are a number of microbes that can help with heavy metal detoxification. Lactobacillus plantarum in particular is really good at aluminum. There are we have some microbes in our formulas that can deal with mercury, but I have to look up what they are. A lot of the soil-based probiotics can deal with those heavy metals.
Okay. This was from before, and I am so sorry because obviously I'm reading the chat a bunch and I have stuff going on with the team. So this is almost 30 minutes ago. At some point, you must have said something about a filter. So this is like 25 minutes ago. They were asking, what is the best filter? Do you even know what they're referring to? Or you guys can update us in the chat.
I don't know if that's a water filter. I did talk about water filtration, the importance of water, because public water systems don't filter out the pharmaceutical pollution. I'm not an expert on that, but I can tell you I have a really fancy water filtration system in my house. And we noticed with John, we had a very fancy water filtration in one of our houses, and he was very stable all the years that we were there. And then when we sold it and moved and we're temporarily renting a condo, within months of moving into that and starting to drink tap water again, he started to have issues. And we bought a house and installed another filtration system. And so I think that is one of the most underappreciated things, is the importance of clean water and the fact that our public water systems are not removing pharmaceutical pollution.
So I don't know if you would generically recommend it, but what is the filter then that you use?
Well, I have I installed something from a company called Personova, and they test your water and actually build a custom system for your local water situation. So they'll put custom filters depending on what the major issues in your local water area are.
Okay, that's the concept that whether or not I didn't know the company offhand, but that is the concept that seems to be the future of this stuff, is like, okay, when we talk about polluted water, it's like, well, how is it polluted? Because not every filter does exactly the same thing. So it seems to me that the best options is to do exactly what you did. Have the water tested, have a company that actually does that, whether it's Personova or something else, figure out what's going on in yours and change accordingly. We're moving out of here soon. So admittedly, I haven't went full out with it. I also don't drink the tap water personally, but when we moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, I hadn't even thought about this. The first thing I figure out when I look it up is that there's like 17% higher rates of cancers and other conditions here, various health conditions. And even Western medicine recognizes it's because of a lot of the forever chemicals that are in the water around this Cape Fear River. You got military stuff going on, all that. Yeah. So I'm just like, holy cow, 17% and we it's not fully known, but we kind of know why that is. It's probably because of this. Even Western medicine recognizes that. And I'm like, wow, every single person should have something on their water here. And yet you're going to have people living here for 20, 30, 40 years, never really knowing that they can do anything about that. Someone said aqua has been good.
Slow poison. Because you don't, you're not dropping dead from it immediately. So you don't realize how that load is affecting you and the microbes in your gut.
Yes. All right. We are just about to finish up here. Guys, can we get a final thank you, please, for Martha? I just, again, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I also simultaneously love that you're still out here doing this work and finishing exactly what you started. You've been amazing every time I hear from you. Like, I cannot even imagine or comprehend how much time you spend studying and research. And guys, this is not someone that had, an MD when they went to college. It is a completely separate career path. And this is who she is now, talking about this stuff. So if you have the will to do this and you want to study these things, you can do it. We need people, citizen scientists, as you call it, right? We need people like Martha that are out there doing the work and sharing this with others. Guys, I put the link in the chat for you all. You do have this in your emails. It's not hidden from you, but just so you have it, is the link in the chat to get our afternoon session. We are going to take an hour break here, and then we will be back then. And remember, you can actually get a free advanced course today, our free blood chemistry course. All you have to do, take a picture of this, tag us on Instagram, Facebook at FDN Training. And you know what? I love Martha so much. I'm not going to do the same thing if that's okay. And I'm going to shout you out. So we're going to do a little internet selfie here, if that's all right.
Okay.
All right. It's going to be a reverse selfie, though, because I'm looking at myself. So Here we go. We'll get the picture here. Let me make this full screen, actually. There we go. All right, smile, everyone. Just kidding. We can't see most of you. All right, sweet. Again, thank you so much. Once we're off of here, we're all good to go. And then once, Martha, you're able to get some resources for us, thank you for even doing that again. We will make sure it's sent out to you guys, whether that's today or later in the week. We will 100% get that to you. So we will see you in an hour. And thank you so much for your time, everyone.